What's up? Good day, fourth raw, my beautiful, glorious Dreamfasters. It is Danny Gallows, of course. Who do you think it was? And welcome to the very last installment of my episode-by-episode review of Age of Resistance. Yeah, guys, we're finally here. We made it all the way to the end. We have finally arrived at episode 10. A single piece was lost. And what a fantastic episode it is. So as we begin this episode, we can see that war is now on the horizon, and both sides are preparing for battle. We can see Deet building smoke bombs, Rian is sifting through Brea's book, kind of looking for inspiration. He's sharpening the dual glaive, the legendary weapon now back in Gelfling hands. And we can also see this love kind of blossoming between Deet and Rian as well. Of course, there were hints of that all throughout the show, but now it's really starting to solidify itself. But the problem is that Deet doesn't want to get too close to Rian. She doesn't want to get too close to anyone, really, because she can see that she's now infected with the darkening. So she doesn't want to even touch anyone. Even when Rian touches her hand, she pulls back immediately because she can feel that something is different about her. Something has changed now in her body, and she doesn't want to infect anyone else. And it's pretty sad when you think about it, because Deet and Rian, they make a great couple. I think that they would probably explore this relationship down the line because, there's a lot of theories about who Jen and Kira's parents are, and Deet and Rian certainly could be one of those couples. And it's also around this time that Madrafera, Celadon, Brea, and the rest of the Gelfling soldiers return to Stone in the Wood, and this is where Rian learns that Mother Aughra sacrificed herself for the cause, basically. But the only thing this does is it really cements their passion for the resistance, because now that they know that Mother Aughra is gone, that she believed in the cause so much that she actually willingly gave her life for it. What this does is it kind of, it really gives them a sense of pride and passion about the resistance, because now they know it's real, it's serious. Mother Aughra herself is gone. Mother Aughra herself just sacrificed herself for us. Now is the time to fight. Now is the time to stand and prove our strength and actually take back our future. And I love that little speech that Rian has about, I will die where I stand before I run again. It's so great and it's so true. This is war. This is the fight for their future right here before them, and it's time to go. And meanwhile, back at the Crystal Castle, we can also see the Skeksis preparing. And we open with the General and the Emperor down below the Crystal Castle, near the crack in the earth where the darkening is coming through the surface. And Skeksis has this very interesting speech here, where he informs the General that, ever since he's been experimenting with the darkening, he's started to dream. And these dreams are kind of recalling emotions about their creation, and about them being torn asunder, the split, the great divide, and how he's starting to think more about what Mother Aughra was mentioning, what waits for them on the other side. They're not natural, they're not of Thra. So what waits for them when death finally comes, right? Probably nothing. And this is really frightening Skeksis in this moment. And he wants the General to make sure that he knows that it's very important to do whatever they can to hold on to life with all claws, as he so eloquently puts it. Because it's very important to them. Because, imagine that, imagine not being a native of the planet and then passing away, right? What does wait for you on the other side? That's why they're so obsessed with staying alive, because the scariest notion ever to the Skeksis is what does happen. It's not knowing what happens to them when they finally perish and leaving this earth. It could be some kind of eternal prison, eternal blackness, eternal nothingness. So they need to hold on to life with everything they have, no matter the cost. And after this, we have a great series of events where we finally get to see the Skeksis in their full battle armor. And this is the first time that we've actually seen this ever on screen. The only other time we've seen the Skeksis in full battle armor is, of course, in the creation myths, in the graphic novels. But here, now we finally get to see them just fully adorned in everything, full bore, swords raised in the air. They have all these new pieces of armor that kind of spike up and fly out of their bodies, giving them this very kind of vicious appearance, almost like giant walking spiders or something. And I just love the look of their battle armor. The Skeksis look so cool, whether you love or hate them, man. The Skeksis look so cool in their battle armor, and they're crying and screaming and, shouting and preparing themselves for war, and it's such a great scene. And that's cut with Rian training everyone how to fight. He's training people how to use swords, how to use spears, how to defend themselves in battle, right? And now it's real, right? War isn't on the horizon anymore, it's knocking at the door. And now they know that this is their time to fight, this is their time to rise up. It is as real as it can possibly get. They are literally tasting war on their tongues. It's about to go down. And now the Skeksis are officially off to war. Well, all the Skeksis except for the scientist, that is, who has been left behind to do what he does best, which is working on the new Aratham super soldiers, of course, which will be the Gartham in the future, as we all know. And this is an interesting scene here because it shows that his assistants, the Grunaks, well, they aren't too keen about not being let go. Right, because they were promised freedom by the Chamberlain, but then he immediately, of course, took it back. So they're not too happy. And we can see now as the scientist begins to kind of, toil around his laboratory, as we start to focus on the Grunaks, you can see that, they're coming up with some plans of their own. They might have a secret agenda of their own for getting themselves out. There might be a little, I guess what you would call a Grunak resistance rising in Skektek's laboratory, which will have a major impact on the show in just a little bit. Now, after this, we get this hilarious scene of Skektek going out onto the Emperor's throne and pretending to be the Emperor, ordering food from the podlings and ordering them to play music and everything, and we get to see, at least for a brief moment, how Skektek would appear on the Emperor's throne, which is great. But during the scene, one of our dear friends does come back to life finally. That's right, Skekmal is not dead, my friends. He springs back to life, gets out of that ridiculous gear that he was in, and returns to the hunt. He, not before insulting the scientist, of course, for being weak and staying behind. But I love that scene, man, because I was just like, I remember watching that and, being like, oh man, it's getting good, because you didn't know at that point exactly what was happening with Skekmal. Of course, we know that Urva is still alive, so we had this idea in our heads that Skekmal might still be alive. Of course, we see like the finger twitching and stuff like that, so we had this idea, but we didn't know if he was going to come back to life. In that moment when he springs back to life, and he springs out the door and returns to the hunt, I was just like, yes, now it's getting good, because what good would this battle be without Skekmal? And then, at long last, the great battle of our time finally begins. The Gelfling and the Skeksis come together, and war springs to life. And I love that scene right before the battle begins, where we see, the iron resolve of the Gelfling on full display, knowing that it doesn't matter if they die here, even if they all perish here, that their sacrifice will inspire others to fight. And it's all about making a stand. It's all about standing up for themselves and proving themselves in this moment so that the future may happen. And then, of course, Rian and the general get into it. They have a nice little battle. I loved how that scene was directed and executed. Again, if you direct that scene just slightly wrong, it's just in a slightly different way than it was executed, it comes off as ridiculous and hilarious and stupid. But that scene is so well executed that it actually plays out again. Seeing Gelfling as live action characters, it plays out like a live action sequence with real humans doing real stunts, except we're seeing puppets doing stunts, and it's awesome. And of course, Rian lands a blow on the general, a quite fatal blow, a really, really hard blow, because you got to remember that the dual glaive sucks the essence out of people. So he just sucked all the essence out of the general with that one single blow and sends the Emperor kind of, off by himself. And he shouldn't be by himself right now. And then all hell breaks loose. We have soldiers charging, we have Skeksis screaming, we have all the female Gelfling raining fire down from the sky, Madrafera screaming for Thra. It is pure chaos, and it is fantastic. And once again, just like I had mentioned, these action sequences are so brilliantly directed. I mean, how they were able to do these performances with puppets and make it seem so real, make it seem so visceral, right? I mean, because this is one of those white-knuckled, kind of on the edge of your seat action sequences where your eyes are just glued to the screen and you cannot take your eyes off the screen because all this action that's going on. is so unbelievably good. You want to see every single inch of the battlefield. You want to absorb everything that you can from this amazing sequence that's going on. And it's just a testament to the filmmakers to be able to understand their properties so well that they can pull off, that they can execute action sequences like this that will excite even those who aren't into puppets. You know, if you weren't into puppets before, well, you certainly are now. But before the battle gets too hot and heavy, we get to take a little bit of a break to watch some Grunaks die. Do you guys think that you were getting a break from the violence and the war and the chaos? No, 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 no. This is the Dark Crystal. We stay dark here. And this is, by far, the most gruesome, darkest sequence in the entire show. Like, anytime you mention, like, Grunaks just casually to a Dark Crystal fan, this is the scene that comes to mind because of how brutal it is. And, you know, as we see the Grunaks kind of revolt against the scientists, you think for a second, you know, like, well, the Grunaks are pretty strong, actually. The scientist is one of the weaker Skeksis, so they might be able to take the upper hand here. And for a second, they do. You know, you're like, wow, like, they're actually going to beat the scientists down here and escape for their lives. But oh no, Skeksis is so full of rage right now. He's so mad that he was left out of the battlefield, that Skekmal is belittling him and making fun of him. He is just filled with pure rage right now. And as the Grunaks begin to revolt, he takes care of them, casting first one of them into the fire, which is, again, a symbolic kind of take on what happens to Skeksis in the Dark Crystal. Of course, Skeksis falls into the fire pit. So before that, of course, he had to throw one of the Grunaks in there to make things kind of connection, the full circle kind of aspect going on. But then the other Grunak, you know, it's almost better to be thrown into a fire pit, right? The first Grunak had it well, because what Skeksis does next is just almost beyond imagination, because it's like, you know, again, this was supposed to be a kid's show. They make it seem like it's like a children's show, like it's for the younger audience, but I don't think beating a Grunak to death is exactly a children's show, and that's why it's not. That's why I don't consider it to be a children's show, because it's filled with so many scenes like that. But this scene in particular is really brutal. I mean, and it's not like, it's not light or anything. I mean, we don't actually see the Grunak being beaten to death. We don't actually see it, but we know that Skeksis has got this heavy piece of metal in his hand, and he's literally beating this Grunak into a pulp, and we can see the blood splattering on the Sedetic's face, the little creature that Skeksis has and inside his cage there, and blood splattering all over the ground as he's beating this Grunak to death, and we can hear it. You can hear, like, the pulp being created as he's beating it, and I will never, ever forget watching that scene. I was just like, my God, like, did that actually happen? Now, as we return to Stone in the Wood, we can see that the battle is, of course, still raging on, and the Gelfling effort is not without sacrifice, as we can see now that many soldiers have died, and including Maudrefera, who has a very sad goodbye, you know, kind of forgiving Celadon in that moment, and Celadon really grieving because she knows that, again, that she should be there, right, because Maudrefera saved her, and it should be her there, but it's not. Celadon lives on, right, and we get this very sad scene where Maudrefera passes away, Thra calls her home, very, very touching scene. But don't worry, because the Skeksis are also about to face a major loss in the death of the general at the hands of the evil Chamberlain. That's right, the mischievous ways of the Chamberlain finally come full circle as well, as he corners the injured general and takes his sword and stabs him straight through, twisting that blade around, making sure to get every internal organ just right, just severed, just enough, so that the general immediately perishes, and we finally see a Skeksis turn to dust on screen for technically the first time ever in Dark Crystal history, as the Chamberlain just kind of watches him crumble to dust. And it's such a great scene, not only because we get to see the death of a Skeksis, but also because we know, you know, now the Chamberlain has once again reclaimed his spot as the Emperor's advisor, as his right-hand man. And that is going to play into the future big time. It's exactly where he wants to be. It's exactly what the plan that he was trying to execute this whole time. And the evil of the Chamberlain will definitely continue. And now we come to my favorite sequence, and it really is my favorite sequence. I know I say that a lot. I've said that a lot during this entire review, but this really is my favorite sequence of the entire show, which is Archer's sacrifice. Man, what an amazingly powerful scene this was. As of course we see Skekmal charging back on the battlefield. I love how he picks up Rian and he throws him like a bowling ball onto the stairs, and then he comes, beside him and grabs him by the head and holds him up, and says, just talking about their pitiful resistance, and he's about to crush Rian's head. And of course this is cut with this scene of Archer back at the Circle of the Suns, and he wakes up from this dream that he has had about basically Aughra's truth. And he's been watching Skekmal through his eyes. He can see Skekmal, his counterpart, of course, through his eyes and what he is about to do. So he takes himself out of bed, out onto the platform of the Circle of the Suns, sings his song before Thra as the music rises, and Skekmal is just about to kill Rian. He's just about to squash his skull. And just when you think that all hope is lost and you're not exactly sure what Archer is about to do, he just falls off the edge of the platform. And for a moment, right, anybody who's not really that familiar with Dark Crystal, for a moment you're like, oh my god, like what did he just do? Why did he just kill himself? But of course he's doing this for a very specific reason, because this is how he can end the hunt. The only way he can end the hunt is that if he plummets from the platform and takes his own life, he will also take Skekmal's life, because he can see in that moment that the Gelfling resistance is about to end. You crush Rian, you crush the wielder of the dual blade, and it's all over. And he knows that this vision, this dream that he's had is a vision that he's received from Aughra, knowing that there is a way for her to come back and save the resistance. There's a way to end the hunt. But the only way to do that is if you sacrifice yourself, is if you throw yourself off that platform. Then the hunt ends forever, and all of Aughra's visions come true. And man, that whole sequence where Urva is falling and he's just turning to stardust before your eyes. I mean, it's just like, there are certain levels of cry, like weeping when you're watching fantasy properties, kind of what we would call nerd tears. And this is like on like a Final Fantasy X, like the ending of Final Fantasy X level cry, which is big for me because, no matter how many times I watch the ending of Final Fantasy X, I always weep. No matter how many times I watch Archer's Sacrifice, I always weep. And my God, what a powerful sequence that was. And of course, not only does this claim Skekmal's life, turning him to stardust before everyone's eyes, but this also brings Mother Aughra back to life through Skekmal. Now, a lot of people were confused about the sequence. They weren't really sure how this happened. And from my understanding, just to explain things basically, what happened is when Mother Aughra went to sacrifice herself, right, and drain her essence, when she gave her essence to Skekmal, that means that Mother Aughra is basically coursing through Skekmal's veins. And because Urva and Skekmal are connected, when Urva sacrificed himself, that opened up Death's door to Skekmal. And as Skekmal was passing through Death's door, Aughra used that moment and all that energy that she had, because she was inside of Skekmal, to then come back to life. She basically took Skekmal's life and came back through Skekmal. As Skekmal disappeared, as Skekmal drained, Mother Aughra came up back through Skekmal, basically taking his life and Urva's life. She basically took both of their life energy, Urva's life energy and Skekmal's life energy, and she came back to life. And again, I absolutely loved this, because at first, I'll admit that I was confused by that too. But when you have it explained to you like that, you're like, oh, okay, like that makes sense, right? Because you got to remember, this is a fantasy story, this is Thra, the rules are different in this universe. But when you have it explained to you like that, it does make sense, right? Because you understand then in that moment that that was Aughra's plan all along. Even though it seemed like a dire situation where Mother Aughra was giving herself up for the resistance and she was sacrificing herself for the resistance, well, she wasn't really, because she knew that she was coming back. She had foreseen that this was a path that she could take. If she sacrificed herself in this moment, the Skeksis would get her essence and give that to Skekmal, allowing her to come back at the end of the show. It was all a giant plan from Mother Aughra. And, that's why Mother Aughra is so cool, man. Now, at this point in the battle, we finally see all of the other clans arriving to assist the Gelfling resistance. And this is what we were waiting for. We were wondering the entire battle, where are the rest of the Gelfling clans? Didn't they hear Rianne's call? Right, we just had this big kind of event go on where Rianne was calling everybody to his cause and getting everybody to fight for the resistance, but nobody showed up. And finally we see in this moment, this great epic moment where all of the other clans show up and show their support for Rianne, ready to fight. Even Deeth's fathers are there. Deeth's fathers are there with swords in their hands, ready to come out, the Groton facing the light once again to go to battle. And it's so awesome to see. But of course, we all know that Skeksis is not going to give up that easily, and he uses this opportunity to take his crystal staff that is imbued with the darkening to send these purple bolts of, I guess they're like purple bolts of lightning almost, jumping across the surface towards the Gelfling. And we think for a moment that this is the end of the battle, until Deet has this sudden realization where she's kind of looking at her hands and she's like, wait a minute, I'm infected with the darkening. I wonder if I can step in front of everybody and somehow save them from the darkening, maybe kind of use this as a shield. And she does exactly that. She steps in front of everybody and she just absorbs all of the darkening, because she already has the darkening in her. So the darkening, maybe there's some kind of attraction where the darkening goes to the darkening or something like that. It can be kind of absorbed into things that are infected by the darkening. So she absorbs all of this energy. And nobody knows what she's doing, right? Everybody's like, Deet, what are you doing? What's going on? Obviously it's very, very dangerous and dire, but nobody understands what's going on. And she absorbs all this energy, and then we get that great get away from my friends sequence. Get away from my friends! And she sends all that darkness right back at the Emperor, right back at the Skeksis, I should say, which for some reason only affects Skek as we get that great scene where her head explodes. So for some reason it only jumped to her, but that's enough for the Emperor to send them into a full retreat, because they're not about to mess around with that. And so the Gelfling have finally won the day. The battle is over, the Gelfling are victorious, the Skeksis are in full retreat back to the Crystal Castle, and the day is theirs. But all is not well, is it? Because even though Mother Aughra sings of hope and change and new beginnings, and Brea now has the long-lost shard of the crystal, well, Deet has disappeared. And the last shot we ever see of Deet is her kind of looking, horrible, infected by the darkening with purple eyes, blackened eyes, and purple skin, and just looking absolutely ghostly, menacing, really. And the last shot we see is her disappearing into the woods. Rianne watches her walk into the woods, and as she walks into the woods, all of nature is dying around her. And it's such a sad scene, because we know that obviously the Deet didn't want this. Deet sacrificed everything to save the resistance in that moment, and she paid for it. Deet, this beautiful child of nature that brought light and love and life to everything, is now walking through the forest, killing everything. She can't even be around nature anymore without killing it. So now where is she going to go? What's she going to do, right? Obviously, there's much more to the story. There's much more to be seen. There's much more to be experienced. So, I can't wait for season 2. Oh yeah, that's right. So my friends, in conclusion, what more can I say about this show that I haven't said 100 times already? This show is pure magic. And in all seriousness, I've never seen a show like this before. I think about the first time. I often go back and relive that time of, experiencing Age of Resistance for the first time, and really, just being blown away by how good it was. And it wasn't just that, I was seeing bad movies and bad TV shows at the time, watching Dark Crystal Age of Resistance at any time, when you're at your saddest or when you're at your happiest, you still fully understand how amazing this show was for so many different reasons. But I think, I've touched on this before in a previous video, but what's most amazing about this is how groundbreaking it was. It's the first high fantasy story, the first high fantasy story to ever be told on screen that is not utilizing any live actors. All of the actors are puppets. It's just puppets and they're puppeteers. And in that, the show was groundbreaking. In that, the show was the new Star Wars. Just like George Lucas created a brand new style of filmmaking when he created Star Wars, you know what? That's exactly what Dark Crystal Age of Resistance did. They did that too. They created a brand new cutting-edge style of filmmaking, first high fantasy story that doesn't feature any live actors. And of course, it'll take people a while to get used to that, to catch on to that notion. But it is what it is. It's what makes Dark Crystal so great. Aside from the voice acting and the puppeteering, the master puppeteering, and the directing, the cinematography, the visuals, the story, whatever you want to say about Dark Crystal Age of Resistance, it has it. And it has it in spades. And no other TV show even comes close to the magic and the love, the compassion, the care that was put into this show to make puppets appear as live actors, to give them actual performances, right? This was the start of something great. This was the start of a new future of filmmaking. And it's just so sad to see it go. I mean, obviously they were planning for a second season, rewatching the last episode, I realized how many open-ended scenes there were. Like, just to use an example, like when Hup picks up Laura's key, right, the key to activate Lore, and he looks at Lore and he's like, he has this little moment like that, right? That's an open-ended scene. Scenes aren't put in shows for no reason. Every scene is put in a show for a specific reason. So obviously they were planning to set up for season 2, but it was just like, they wanted to execute a season 2. They had all these kind of the structuring set up. They had the stories all lined up and they were all ready to go, and then all of a sudden it just got canceled. They just kind of pulled the rug out from everyone and they were like, oh, never mind. And that's why it's so detrimental to Dark Crystal fans, because every time you watch that last episode, you're like, they were obviously setting up for a season 2. It's so blatantly obvious. I mean, the end of Age of Resistance, the last episode, that is the definition of a cliffhanger. It doesn't get more cliffhanger than that. That's what a cliffhanger is, right? So it's just so sad to Dark Crystal fans because, where is the continuation of our story? And it's not just, that we don't have any more Age of Resistance. Dark Crystal fans don't have any more of anything. There's no new book series, there's no new comic series, graphic novels, little tiny webtoons, I don't know, nothing. And this is after the producers have said on multiple occasions that even though they can't continue the show right now, that there will be more Dark Crystal material, right? We're waiting, right? It's been years, and we're still waiting. It's like everybody just abandoned this show. And it's so weird to see all of these mediocre shows that are receiving these lukewarm, mediocre reception, getting called back for second seasons and third seasons and fourth seasons. And meanwhile, Dark Crystal, one of the greatest TV shows ever made, is just there. And it's just, nobody's paying any attention to it. It's like this literal diamond in the rough that has been buried with sand, and the only people still keeping it alive and still keeping the sand cleared from the surface are Dark Crystal fans. And it's really, really heartbreaking, because this show deserves a second season, a third season, movies. Just like I said before, you could have milked this thing for 30 years if you had done it right. This was the next big franchise. You had the next big franchise. You could have built this up into something massive. It could have gone on for years. All kinds of material, plus conventions also. So, in conclusion, the only thing I can say is, I really hope that we can solidify as a community and get the Henson Company to realize that we're still out here, we're still passionate, we still want Age of Resistance to continue. And, oh, by the way, I'm going to have a video coming in the next couple of weeks
for an interesting idea that some of you guys had as fans that you presented to me that I want to present to all of you, and we'll see if it's a good idea. We'll see if we can get it off the ground, but of course that's coming in future videos. So guys, that's going to do it for my episode by episode review of Age of Resistance. I had a blast doing this. It was so much fun. I mean, I'm seriously going to miss this. I'm seriously going to miss coming in here, turning on the camera, and talking about these episodes. But of course, this isn't where it ends. There's more Dark Crystal material coming. Next video after this, I'm going to be doing my thoughts and ideas about a Season 2, basically laying out what I think should happen in Season 2, like a full detailed kind of script for Season 2 involving all of the characters and all the situations and everything that could possibly happen in Season 2. I'm going to lay all of my ideas out for you guys. That'll be really fun too, and that'll be coming in the next couple of weeks after I take a brief break. So as always guys, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for staying passionate, for staying strong, for just pouring your love continuously into this community, because that's what we need right now. It's all about Dark Crystal. It's all about Age of Resistance. It's all about keeping the dream alive and keeping the hope alive. Because as long as we stay strong, the Dark Crystal stays strong also. So as always guys, until next we meet, take care. For Thra, for Jim, love you guys, and I'll see you guys back here for the next video very soon. Love the Dark Crystal.